My stepdaughter looked me dead in the eye and said the greatest wedding gift I could give her was my absence because I was not her real father. I was just Hank the wallet. My wife sat right next to her and said nothing, so I did exactly what she asked. I didn't go. But I also sold the house, canceled the venue, and emptied the bank accounts. When they returned to find what I left in the empty kitchen, it changed their lives forever. If you have ever been treated like an ATM by the people you love, hit the like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I was staring at a hairline fracture in the crown molding of the restaurant ceiling, thinking that for $200 a plate, they really should have hired a better drywall guy. That is the curse of being a general contractor for 40 years. You walk into a 5-star establishment like Le Jardin in downtown Chicago, and instead of admiring the crystal chandeliers, you are calculating the load-bearing capacity of the beams. The waiter placed a plate in front of me that was 90% white space and 10% scallop. He looked at my hands with a subtle sneer. I knew what he saw. My knuckles are swollen from decades of swinging hammers, and my skin is weathered from the Illinois winters. I scrub them clean, but the grit of the job site never really leaves you. I am Henry Caldwell, but everyone calls me Hank. At 71 years old, I have built half the subdivisions in this county, but in this room surrounded by velvet curtains and hushed whispers, I was clearly the outsider. My wife Patricia sat across from me, beaming at her daughter Brittany. Patricia looked elegant in her silk blouse, a woman who had aged gracefully, thanks to the life I provided. Brittany was 26 and glowing with the kind of entitlement that only comes from never having heard the word no. Next to her was Tyler, her fiancé, a 28-year-old stockbroker who had a firm handshake but soft palms. He spent more time looking at his reflection in the silverware than he did looking at his future bride. "So Hank, what do you think of the scallop?" Tyler asked, swirling his wineglass like he had seen in a movie. "It is distinct," Brittany chimed in before I could answer. "It screams luxury. Tyler and I want the wedding to be an experience, a statement." I nodded and cut the scallop in half. It tasted like butter and pretension. I was not there to critique the food, though. I was there to pay for it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the bank. Another charge for the floral arrangements. $5,000. That brought the running total for this wedding to somewhere north of $85,000. I had already paid $40,000 in deposits, and today I was supposed to swipe my card for the next installment of $15,000 to secure the venue. I looked at Patricia. She gave me that soft, pleading smile she always used when the bill arrived. I loved her. I had loved her for 15 years since I met her, when Brittany was just a chaotic 10-year-old. I stepped in when their world was falling apart. I paid off Patricia's debts, I put a roof over their heads, and I paid for Brittany's private school and then her university degree. I thought we were a team. The waiter returned with the card reader on a little silver tray. He hovered next to my elbow, waiting for the inevitable. I reached for my wallet. It was a reflex. I am the provider. That is what I do. I fix things and I pay for things. "Wait," Brittany said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient classical music. She reached out and put her hand over my credit card, pressing it down onto the tablecloth. I looked up, surprised. "Did you want to split the bill?" I joked, knowing fully well that Tyler's portfolio was mostly smoke and mirrors. "No, Hank," Brittany said, and her tone dropped a few degrees. "We need to talk about the seating chart before you pay that deposit." Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She took a sip of water, her eyes darting away from mine. That was the first warning sign. My gut, which had saved me from bad contracts and collapsing roofs more times than I could count, tightened. "What about the seating chart?" I asked, leaving my hand on my wallet. Brittany took a deep breath and exchanged a look with Tyler. Tyler nodded, encouraging her. "Look, Hank," she started, pulling a folded piece of paper from her designer purse. "We have been discussing the aesthetic of the wedding. It is going to be very high-end, very editorial, like something out of Vogue." I waited. And we were looking at the head table layout, she continued. Traditionally, the parents of the bride sit with the couple, but Tyler and I think it would look better if the head table was curated. Curated? I repeated the word, tasting foreign in my mouth. Yes, curated, Brittany said, gaining confidence. We think it would be best if you didn't sit at the head table. We have a spot for you at table 9. It is near the kitchen, so you will get the food first. Table 9. The back of the room. I looked at Patricia. She was studying the pattern on the tablecloth intently. Is this a joke? I asked quietly. It is not personal, Hank Tyler interrupted, trying to sound authoritative. It is just about the visuals, the photos. We want a certain look for the main dais. A certain look, I said slowly. You mean you do not want the old man with the rough hands and the wind-burned face ruining your Instagram photos? Brittany sighed, loud and dramatic. God, Hank, why do you always have to make it about you? This is my day. And honestly, yes, you do not fit the vibe. You look like a worker. We want people to see elegance. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't anger yet. It was shock. I looked down at my hands. The hands that had signed the checks for her braces for her first car for the down payment on the condo she lived in before she met Tyler. Okay, I said, my voice steady. I will sit at table 9. Is that all? I moved to lift my credit card again. I just wanted to pay the $15,000 and leave. I wanted to go home to my workshop and sand some wood. I wanted to be somewhere real. Actually, that is not all, Brittany said, and she pressed her hand down harder on my card. There is one more thing. I looked her in the eye. What is it, Brittany? It is about the ceremony, she said. You know how you were going to walk me down the aisle? Yes, I said. We practiced it. Well, she paused, and a cruel little smile played on her lips. I have been thinking. It does not feel right. You are my stepfather, Hank. You have been great, really. But you are not my dad. The air left the room. I froze. What are you saying? I whispered. I contacted my dad. Brittany said brightly, as if she was talking about finding a lost earring. Mick. I found him on Facebook. He is doing really great. He is coming to the wedding, and I want him to walk me down the aisle. Mick. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Mick was a drunk who had abandoned them 20 years ago, leaving Patricia with a mountain of debt and a crying child. Mick had never paid a dime of child support. Mick had never shown up for a graduation, a birthday, or a hospital visit. You are joking, I said, looking at Patricia. Tell me she is joking, Patricia. Mick. The man who left you with a black eye and an empty bank account. Patricia finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Hank, please, she said softly. It is her wedding. She wants her father. It is a biological bond. You cannot understand. A biological bond, I repeated. Where was his biological bond when she had appendicitis, and I sat in the waiting room for 12 hours? Where was his bond when I paid her tuition? That is different, Brittany snapped. That was money. This is emotion. This is about family. My real family. Look, Hank, you are great for the logistics. You are a great provider. But Mick has charisma. He looks good in a suit. He fits the aesthetic. She actually said that. He fits the aesthetic. So let me get this straight, I said, and my voice was dangerously calm. I sensed the waiter stepping back, sensing the tension. You want me to pay for the wedding. You want me to pay for the venue, the food, the flowers, and the dress. But you do not want me to sit with you. And you do not want me to walk you down the aisle. You want the man who abandoned you to take the glory while I sit by the kitchen door. Brittany rolled her eyes. You are being so dramatic. You are still invited. You are still a guest. We are just adjusting the roles to fit reality. You are Robert. Sorry, I mean you are Hank. You are the stepdad. That is your role. Support from the background. I looked at Tyler. He was smirking. A tiny, victorious smirk that said he had won. He had secured the money, but pushed out the old man. I looked at Patricia one last time. This was her moment. This was the moment she could have stopped it. She could have said, "No, Brittany, Hank is the man who raised you, he walks you." Patricia reached out and covered my hand, the one holding the credit card. "Hank, honey," she said, "just do this for her. It is one day. Just pay the deposit and we can figure out the details later. Don't ruin this. Don't ruin this." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap like a dry branch. It was a silent structural failure, like a foundation giving way deep underground. The love I had held for these women for 15 years evaporated in a single second, leaving behind nothing but clarity. I looked at the waiter. I looked at the bill totaling $15,000 for the deposit. I looked at the credit card under Brittany's manicured fingernails. I pulled my hand back. Brittany's hand slipped off my card and hit the table. "What are you doing?" she asked, annoyed. "Give him the card. We are running late for the cake tasting." I picked up my credit card. I looked at it for a moment. It was a black card, the kind you only get when you have significant assets. Assets I had built with sweat and blood. I slid the card back into my wallet. "Hank," Patricia said, her voice rising in panic. "Hank, pay the bill." "No," I said. "What do you mean, no?" Brittany laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Stop joking. It is not funny." "I am not joking," I said. I stood up. My knees popped slightly. I felt tall, taller than I had felt in years. I pushed my chair back. The screech of the wood against the floor was satisfyingly loud. "You want aesthetic?" I said, looking down at them. "You want a wedding that reflects reality. I think that is a wonderful idea. The reality is that I am just a guest, and guests do not pay for the wedding." I turned to the waiter. "Check for one, please." "Just the scallop and the water," Hank, Patricia hissed, standing up and grabbing my arm. "Everyone is looking. Sit down. You are embarrassing us." "No, Patricia," I said, pulling my arm away. "I am not embarrassing you. I am liberating you. You want Mick to be the father. Let Mick pay the deposit." "But Mick doesn't have any money," Brittany shouted, forgetting her posh accent. He is in between jobs." "Well," I said, adjusting my jacket. "Then I guess he better find a job that pays $15,000 by 5 p.m. today, because that is when the hold on this venue expires." I threw a $20 bill on the table for my scallop. "Enjoy the tasting," I said. I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. But I could hear them. I could hear Brittany screaming at her mother. I could hear the silence of the other diners. I walked out into the cool Chicago air. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I walked to my truck, my beat-up Ford F-150 that Tyler hated so much. I sat inside and locked the doors. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Come back right now. You are being childish. We can discuss the seating." I deleted the text. I sat there for a moment watching the traffic. I thought about the house on the lake, the house I had bought, the house that was legally in a trust that I controlled. I thought about the bank accounts. I thought about the wedding planner who had my credit card on file for the remaining balance. Brittany wanted a gift. She wanted me to disappear. I started the engine. The rumble of the diesel engine felt like a growl. "Be careful what you wish for, sweetie," I said to the empty cab. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going back to the office. I was going to the bank. And then I was going to make a phone call that would bring their entire aesthetic world crashing down around their ears. This was not a tantrum. This was a demolition. And I am the best contractor in the business. The drive back to the lake house was quiet, in the way a funeral procession is quiet, heavy with things unsaid and resentments simmering just below the surface. Patricia had chased me into the parking lot, signaling for Brittany and Tyler to follow, assuming, as they always did, that I would be their chauffeur. They climbed into my Ford F-150 with the reluctance of royalty, being forced to ride in a cattle car. Patricia took the passenger seat, keeping her distance from me, as if my earlier refusal to pay was a contagious disease. Brittany and Tyler squeezed into the back, their knees pressing against the leather I had conditioned just last week. I turned the key, and the diesel engine roared to life. It was a sound I loved, a sound of power and reliability. But I saw Tyler wince in the rearview mirror. He adjusted the collar of his Italian suit, a suit I knew cost more than my first car, and let out a sigh that was loud enough to be heard over the engine. "My God," Hank Tyler said, leaning forward slightly so his voice would carry to the front. "When are you going to get rid of this dinosaur?" The suspension feels like we are driving on square wheels. My spine is going to be misaligned for the wedding photos. I kept my eyes on the road merging onto the highway that led out of downtown Chicago. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to tell him that this truck had hauled the lumber that built the deck he liked to drink his craft beer on. I wanted to remind him that the BMW 5 Series parked in the garage, the one he drove to his meetings to impress clients, was a gift from me last Christmas, because he complained his old car was hurting his image. But I said nothing. I just let the hum of the tires on the asphalt fill the space. "It smells like sawdust back here," Brittany added, wrinkling her nose. She rolled the window down an inch, letting the cold wind whip through the cabin. "It is sticking to my dress. I am going to smell like a lumberyard at the tasting." "You are not going to the tasting," I thought. But I kept that to myself, too. "Honestly, Mom," Brittany continued, turning her attention to Patricia, "it is probably for the best that Hank isn't coming to the ceremony. I was thinking about it just now. Can you imagine explaining him to the investors Tyler invited?" I glanced at Patricia, waiting for her to defend me, waiting for her to say that I was a master craftsman, that I ran a company that employed 40 people, that I was the reason they were sitting in leather seats instead of taking the bus. But Patricia just smoothed her skirt and looked out the window. "You know how people are," Brittany went on, emboldened by her mother's silence. "They see rough hands and a sunburned neck, and they assume things. We want the wedding to scream old money, sophistication. Having a contractor sitting at the head table, it just breaks the illusion. It confuses the branding. Branding. My role as a father and a husband had been reduced to a marketing conflict. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat, acrid like bile. They didn't see a man. They saw a prop that was no longer useful. We passed the exit for the private university Brittany had graduated from 3 years ago. The red brick buildings of the campus were visible from the highway, standing tall and majestic against the gray skyline. The sight of the clock tower triggered a memory so sharp it almost made me hit the brakes. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table 5 years ago, staring at a tuition bill for $50,000 a semester. Brittany had been crying on the sofa because her biological father, Mick, had promised to help her apply for financial aid, but had disappeared on a bender in Las Vegas instead. She was terrified she wouldn't be able to go. I remembered looking at her tear-stained face, that same face that was now sneering at the back of my head, and telling her not to worry. I remembered working double shifts for 4 years, taking on jobs in the dead of winter, framing houses in sub-zero temperatures, until my fingers were so numb I couldn't hold a coffee cup. I did it so she could graduate debt-free. I wrote checks totaling $200,000 over 4 years. And in all that time, Mick had not sent a single birthday card. He hadn't sent a Christmas present. He hadn't even called to congratulate her when she walked across the stage to get her diploma. But now, because he had a jawline that looked good in photos and a charm that worked on foolish women. He was the hero. He was the dad. I was just the bank. I saw you wince, Hank Tyler said from the back seat, mistaking my grimace for physical pain. Old age catching up with you. You should really see a chiropractor. Or maybe just retire. Sit on a porch somewhere and whittle. Leave the complex stuff to the modern generation. I looked at him in the mirror. He was scrolling through his phone, probably checking stock prices he didn't understand. He had no idea that the man driving the truck could buy and sell him 10 times over. He had no idea that the complex stuff he was so proud of was financed by the old man he mocked. We turned off the highway and onto the winding road that led to the lake house. The trees here were tall and old, their branches forming a canopy over the road. I had bought the land 20 years ago, when it was just dirt and weeds. I designed the house myself. I laid the foundation. I framed the walls. Every nail, every beam, every sheet of drywall had passed through my hands or the hands of men I trusted. It was my masterpiece. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. As the house came into view, sitting proudly on the edge of the water, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and stone chimney, I felt a surge of protectiveness. It was too good for them. They didn't respect the wood. They didn't respect the stone. They only respected the address. I pulled into the driveway and put the truck in park. The silence returned sudden and deafening. Before I could turn off the engine, Patricia finally spoke. Her voice was tight, anxious. Hank, when we go inside, I need you to move your things out of the master bedroom. I turned to look at her, my hand freezing on the keys. Excuse me. We need the master suite, she said, rushing her words, as if saying them faster would make them less offensive. Brittany and Tyler have a lot of early wedding gifts arriving this week. Big boxes, and they need a space to organize them. The guest rooms are full of Tyler's family staying over from out of town, so we thought, well, the master bedroom has the most space. You want me to move out of my own bedroom, I said slowly, so you can store toaster ovens and blenders. It is just for a few days, Patricia said, avoiding my eyes. You can sleep in the den. The pull-out couch is comfortable. Besides, you snore. It will help everyone get better sleep before the big day. We all need our beauty rest. I looked at Brittany in the back seat. She was smirking again, that same cruel twist of the lips she had worn at the restaurant. Yeah, Hank, she said. Don't be selfish. It is my wedding week. The bride needs space. And honestly, your stuff is everywhere in that room. It is cluttered. We need a clean aesthetic to organize the gifts. A clean aesthetic. There it was again. I was clutter in my own life. I looked at the house I built. I looked at the wife I had cherished. I looked at the children I had supported. And I realized there was no room for me here. Not in the wedding. Not in the photos. Not even in my own bed. Okay, I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm. It was the voice of a man who had checked the blueprints and realized the building was structurally unsound and needed to be condemned. Okay, Patricia repeated, relieved. She smiled, a thin, vapid thing. Thanks for being understanding, honey. I knew you would come around. I pulled the keys out of the ignition. The metal felt cold and hard in my hand. They thought I was surrendering. They thought I was the old dog rolling over to show its belly. They didn't know it. I was just clearing the site before the demolition. I got out of the truck. Tyler and Brittany scrambled out, complaining about the cold, and rushed toward the front door, expecting me to follow with their bags. Patricia lingered for a second, patting my arm in a way that felt more like patting a horse than touching a husband. Don't stay out here too long, she said. You need to move your clothes before dinner. Tyler's parents are coming over at 6, and I don't want them to see your work boots in the hallway. She turned and walked up the stone path, her heels clicking on the pavers I had laid with my own 2 hands. I stood by the truck, watching the front door close behind them. I heard the lock click. The sound was final. I looked down at my work boots. They were dusty. They were scuffed. They were the boots of a man who built things. And starting tonight, I was going to start deconstructing everything I had built for them, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. I walked to the side of the garage where the security system control panel was mounted. I knew the code. They didn't know that I had installed a secondary server last month, one that backed up all the audio and video from inside the house directly to my private cloud storage. I had done it for security against burglars. I never thought the thieves would be the ones sleeping in my master bedroom. I took out my phone and checked the app. The cameras were live. I could see them walking into the kitchen. I could see Tyler opening the fridge and taking out a beer, my beer. I could see Brittany throwing her coat onto the island counter. I am going to the den, I whispered to myself. But I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to work. The audit was about to begin. I lay awake on the pull-out couch in the den staring at the ceiling fan that I had installed 10 years ago. The leather cushions were slippery, and the metal bar of the frame was digging into my lower back, a physical reminder of my new status in this family. I was displaced. I was an inconvenience in my own home. The house was silent, settled into that deep, heavy quiet of 2 a.m, but my mind was loud. It was replaying the scene at the restaurant over and over again, the way Brittany's hand had slammed down on my credit card, the way Tyler had smirked, the way Patricia had looked away. My throat felt dry, scratchy from the recycled air of the heating system, so I pushed the scratchy blanket aside and swung my legs onto the cold, hardwood floor. I decided to get a glass of water. I moved through the hallway like a ghost, knowing exactly which floorboards creaked, and stepping over them out of habit. I didn't want to wake anyone. I didn't want to see them. As I approached the kitchen, I saw a sliver of light spilling out from under the laundry room door. It was faint, a warm yellow glow against the dark tiles. I paused. The laundry room was at the far end of the kitchen, tucked away behind the pantry. Why would anyone be doing laundry at 2 a.m? Then I heard the voice. It was Patricia. But it wasn't the voice she used with me. It wasn't the tired, nagging tone she had adopted over the last few years, or the overly sweet, placating tone she used when she wanted money. This voice was hushed, intimate, and laced with a giddy excitement I hadn't heard from her in a decade. I stopped breathing. I stood in the shadows of the kitchen, beside the refrigerator, letting the hum of the compressor mask any sound I might make. I leaned in closer, straining to hear over the thumping of my own heart. "Don't worry about the travel arrangements," she whispered. "I handled it this afternoon. First class. Yes, only the best." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. First class. I flew economy. I had flown economy my entire life, even when I could afford better, because I didn't believe in wasting money on a seat that was just going to get you to the same place at the same time. But Patricia was booking first-class tickets for someone. She laughed a soft, girlish sound. "No, he has no idea. Hank is... well, you know Hank. He's a bit thick when it comes to social cues. He is clueless. He thinks I am just stressed about the flowers." Clueless. Thick. Is that what she thought of me? Is that what she told people? That the man who could calculate the load-bearing capacity of a bridge in his head was too stupid to know when he was being played? I heard a pause as she listened to the person on the other end. I know, she cooed. "It will be perfect. The suit I bought you is going to look amazing. You will outshine everyone. Just stay low until the ceremony. I don't want to risk a scene before the big reveal." The suit. The $3,000 charge I had seen on the bank statement earlier. The one I assumed was for Tyler, even though Tyler usually bought his own clothes. "I love you too," she whispered. That was the dagger. That was the moment the floor dropped out from under me. "I love you too." The call ended. I heard the rustle of fabric as she moved. I backed away, quickly retreating into the darkness of the living room, before she could open the door and see me. I watched from the shadows as she walked past the kitchen island, her face illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. She was smiling. It was a smile of triumph, of secrets kept and plans executed. She went upstairs to the master bedroom, the room I was banned from, and closed the door. I stood there in the dark for a long time. My thirst was gone, replaced by a nausea that roiled in my gut. I needed to know. I needed to see it. I looked at the coffee table in the center of the living room. Patricia's iPad was sitting there plugged into the charger. She often left it downstairs because she liked to read recipes on it in the morning. We shared an Apple ID for the household devices, something I had set up years ago, to make it easier to share photos of the grandkids we hoped to have one day. Patricia was terrible with technology. She never understood the cloud. She never understood that what happened on her phone also happened on the tablet. I walked over to the table and sat down. My hands were shaking not from cold, but from rage. I pressed the home button. The screen lit up harsh and bright in the darkness. I typed in the passcode. It was her birthday. Of course it was. I opened the Messages app. The most recent conversation was at the top. The contact name was Laundry Service. I stared at it. Laundry Service. That was why she was in the laundry room. It was a little inside joke, a cute little disguise for her betrayal. Who calls a laundry service at 2 in the morning? Who tells a laundry service they love them? I tapped on the thread. The history went back months. Thousands of messages, photos, emojis. I scrolled to the bottom to see what she had just sent. Just got off the phone with you. I am so excited. The tickets are in your email. American Airlines Flight 492, Seat 1A. See you soon, my love. And the reply from Laundry Service. You are the best. I can't wait to walk Brittany down that aisle. I am going to be the hero. Hank is just an ATM. He pays we play. Tell my girl her daddy misses her. I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. The air left my lungs in a rush. Hank is just an ATM. He pays we play. I scrolled up, reading more. It was a chronicle of my humiliation. November 12th, Hank is complaining about the catering costs again. He is so cheap. Don't worry, I transferred the money to your account for the dental work. You need that winning smile for the photos. December 4th, Brittany is so happy you are coming. She hates that Hank has to be there at all, but we need his checkbook for the venue. Once the wedding is paid for, we can finally push him out. January 20th, also. I convinced him to buy the BMW for Tyler. He is such a pushover. He thinks he is buying respect. And then a photo of Mick. He was wearing a tuxedo, standing in front of a mirror, holding a glass of scotch. My scotch. I recognized the background. It was my living room. From October 15th, thanks for letting me crash while Hank was at the job site. The scotch is top shelf. Feels good to be the man of the house. He had been in my house. While I was out working, earning the money to pay for the roof over their heads, he had been in my living room, drinking my liquor, wearing the clothes I paid for. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same feeling I got when I had to fire a crew for stealing materials. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. The structural integrity of this family was zero. The foundation was rotten. There was nothing to salvage. I didn't throw the iPad. I didn't scream. I didn't run upstairs and kick the door down. That is what a younger man would have done. That is what a man ruled by emotion would have done. But I am a contractor. I work with specs. I work with evidence. I took my own phone out of my pocket. I opened the camera. I took photos of every single message. I scrolled and snapped, scrolled and snapped. I captured the dates, the times, the specific insults. I captured the proof of the money transfers, the confirmation of the flight tickets, the admission that they were using me. I made sure the photos were clear. I made sure the contact name Laundry Service was visible at the top, and the content of the messages was readable. Then I went to her Photos app. I found the pictures of Mick in my house. I found pictures of the three of them, Patricia, Brittany, and Mick having lunch at a cafe I had never been to, with a caption that read, "The real family reunited." I sent all the photos to my secure cloud storage, the one they didn't know about. I also emailed them to my work address and to my lawyer, Harrison. I placed the iPad back on the coffee table exactly how I had found it. I wiped the screen with my pajama shirt to remove my fingerprints. I stood up. The house felt different now. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a stage where a cruel play was being performed, and I was the only one who hadn't known his lines. I walked to the sliding glass doors that looked out over the lake. The water was black and still reflecting the moonlight like a dark mirror. It was freezing outside, but the cold radiating from the glass felt good against my forehead. I looked at the reflection of the room behind me. The expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the custom drapes. I had bought all of it. I had built this life for them brick by brick, and they despised me for it. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was the dumb old workhorse resting in the stable waiting to be hitched up to the wagon again in the morning. They were wrong. The workhorse had just broken its traces. I stared at the black water and I formulated a plan. I wasn't just going to leave. Leaving was too easy. Leaving would let them spin the narrative. They would tell everyone I was a bitter old man who abandoned them. They would play the victims. Number 1. I was going to dismantle their world with the same precision I used to build it. I was going to wait until the structure was fully loaded, until the weight was at its maximum, and then I was going to pull the pin. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 3 a.m. The banks would open in 6 hours. My lawyer's office would open in 5. I went back to the den and lay down on the pull-out couch. The metal bar still dug into my back, but I didn't feel it anymore. I lay there with my eyes open, staring into the dark, waiting for the sun to rise on the last day of my life as their ATM. I am Henry Caldwell, and tomorrow I am closing the account. The sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon, painting the lake in hues of steel gray and pale orange when I walked down the hallway. But I could hear the faint sounds of snoring coming from the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one I had been evicted from the night before. Patricia was sleeping soundly, probably dreaming of her perfect wedding and the first-class flight she had booked for her ex-husband. I walked past the door without stopping. I went straight to my home office at the end of the hall and turned the heavy brass lock with a satisfying click. This room was the only place in the house that truly felt like mine anymore. It smelled of old paper mahogany and the faint metallic tang of drafting tools. I sat down at my desk, the large oak one I had built myself 20 years ago, and woke up my computer. The screens glowed to life, illuminating my face in the dim room. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I preferred the shadows. I needed to focus. I cracked my knuckles, a habit from years on the job site, and opened the browser. It was time to look at the damage. It was time to audit the books. I logged into our joint bank account, first the one I kept filled for household expenses, and Patricia's discretionary spending. I had always been generous. I never asked for receipts for groceries or spa days because I trusted her. I thought we were partners. But looking at the screen now, the numbers didn't look like partnership, they looked like theft. I pulled up the transaction history for the last 3 months and started cross-referencing it with the text messages I had photographed the night before. The first thing that jumped out at me was a charge from 2 weeks ago, $5,000 to dental artistry. I stared at the line item. Patricia had veneers she had gotten 5 years ago, and they were in perfect condition. Brittany was on her own dental plan through her work, or so she claimed. I clicked on the transaction details. It was paid using the secondary card, the one in Patricia's name. I remembered the text message I had read just hours ago. I transferred the money to your account for the dental work. You need that winning smile for the photos. I felt a cold burn in my stomach. I was paying for Mick's teeth. The man who had likely lost his teeth from years of neglect and substance abuse was now going to be smiling for the wedding photos with a $5,000 smile paid for by my hard work. Every time he grinned at the camera, he would be grinning with my money. I kept scrolling. $3,000 at Milano Menswear. I knew that shop. It was downtown, a place where they tailored suits for executives and politicians. I had never bought a suit there myself, preferring to buy sturdy, sensible clothes that could survive a day on a construction site. I checked the date. It was from last Saturday. I remembered that day. Patricia had told me she was going to a charity auction with some friends. She had lied to my face, kissed me on the cheek, and then gone out to buy a custom tuxedo for the man who had abandoned her. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to control the rage that was threatening to make my hands shake. It wasn't just the money. I had money. It was the audacity. It was the absolute lack of respect. They were dressing him up like a doll, using my wallet so he could play the part of the successful father he never was. I opened a spreadsheet and started entering the figures. I needed a total. I needed to know exactly how much my humiliation cost. Flight tickets, hotel bookings, a rental car charge for a luxury convertible. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, buried under the guise of miscellaneous expenses. Patricia had been siphoning funds for months. Then I opened the file for the wedding expenses. This was a separate account, one I had set up specifically for Brittany's big day. The balance was dropping fast. The venue deposit, the florist, the caterer, the dress. $85,000. That was the budget we had agreed on. But looking at the projections and the pending charges, they were already over budget by $10,000, and the wedding was still days away. And every single dime of it was coming from me. I sat back in my chair and looked at the total on the screen. Over $100,000. That was what it was costing me to be insulted. That was the price tag for sitting at table 9 by the kitchen door. But money is just liquid. It flows in and it flows out. I could earn more money. What I couldn't earn back was the time I had wasted trusting them. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick leather binder. This was the document that mattered. This was the foundation of everything. The deed to the house. I opened the binder and smoothed the heavy paper on the desk. The legal language was dense, but I knew every word of it by heart. I had insisted on it when I bought the land. The Caldwell Revocable Living Trust. I ran my finger over the title. The word revocable was the most beautiful word in the English language right now. When I bought this property and built this house, I put it into a trust. I did it for tax purposes originally, and to avoid probate court if something happened to me. Patricia was listed as a beneficiary, meaning if I died, the house would be hers. But she was not a trustee. I was the sole trustee. I turned to page 14, section 7, paragraph 3. The clause regarding the power of the trustee. The trustee reserves the right to amend, modify, or revoke this trust in whole or in part at any time without the consent of any beneficiary. The trustee maintains full control over all assets within the trust, including the right to sell, transfer, or encumber real property. I read it again. Without the consent of any beneficiary. The house was worth $1.8 million. It was a prime piece of real estate with private lake access and a custom dock. I had poured my soul into this house. I had handpicked the granite for the countertops. I had installed the radiant heating in the floors myself. And they treated it like a hotel. They treated me like the maintenance man. I looked at the signature line at the bottom of the deed. Henry Caldwell. Just me. Patricia's name wasn't on the title. It wasn't on the deed. It was only on the beneficiary line, a promise of a future gift. A gift that could be taken away. I realized then that I wasn't just a victim. I held all the cards. They were playing a game of emotional manipulation, but they had forgotten to check who owned the board. They were so focused on the wedding, on the image, on the aesthetic, that they had forgotten the reality of their existence. They lived in my house. They drove my cars. They ate my food. And they were planning to celebrate their big day by spitting in my face. I looked at the photo of Mick on my computer screen again, the one I had transferred from the iPad. He looked smug in his new suit. He looked like he had won the lottery. In a way, he had. He had found the perfect mark. A man who would raise his daughter, pay for her education, and then pay for his makeover just in time for the victory lap. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was Sunday, but I knew he would answer. Harrison, my lawyer, picked up on the second ring. His voice was gravelly thick with sleep. Hank, it is 7 a.m. on a Sunday. This better be good. It is not good. Harrison, I said, my voice steady and cold. It is necessary. I need you to meet me at the office in an hour. Hank, can't this wait until Monday? No, I said. I am looking at the trust documents, Harrison. I am looking at the clause for revocation. I want to sell the house. There was a silence on the other end. All the sleepiness vanished from Harrison's voice. Sell the house. You mean the lake house? The one you live in? Yes, I said. And I want to do it today. I want it listed as a pocket listing. I don't want a sign in the yard. I don't want photos on Zillow. I want you to call that investor group you told me about last month. The one looking for luxury waterfront properties for cash. Hank, Harrison said slowly. If you do this, if you sell the house out from under Patricia, that is the nuclear option. You know that, right? If you sell the primary residence while you are still married, it is going to get messy. I looked at the bank statement on my screen. I looked at the $5,000 charge for the dentist. I looked at the $3,000 suit. It is already messy, Harrison, I said. They are stealing from me. I have proof of financial infidelity. I have proof of conspiracy to defraud. They are using marital funds to support her ex-husband. Harrison let out a low whistle. Okay. That changes things. If you have proof of dissipation of assets, we can argue that. But selling the house... Hank, you have to be sure. Once you sign those papers, there is no going back. You are making them homeless. I looked around the office. I looked at the framed photos on the wall. Photos of me and Patricia. Photos of Brittany's graduation. They were lies, all of them. I am sure, I said. I want the closing to be in 3 days. 3 days, Harrison choked. That is impossible. Not for cash, it isn't, I said. Make it happen, Harrison. I will take 10% under market value for a 48-hour close. Just get it done. And Harrison? Yeah, Hank. Draft a new will while you are at it. I am revoking the trust beneficiaries. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment listening to the silence of the house. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked. Someone was waking up. Probably Patricia getting up to make coffee and continue her charade. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the long driveway that led to the road. I imagined Mick driving up that driveway in his rental convertible, coming to take my place. Not today, Mick, I whispered. I gathered the papers, the bank statements, and the trust document, and put them into my briefcase. I locked the computer. I unlocked the office door and stepped out into the hallway. The smell of coffee was drifting from the kitchen. Hank, is that you? Patricia called out from the kitchen, her voice sickly sweet. I made your favorite blend. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the front door, picked up my keys, and walked out. I wasn't going to drink her coffee. I wasn't going to play happy family. I was going to dismantle their lives. And I was going to start by selling the roof over their heads. The drive into downtown Chicago was a blur of gray concrete and steel. I navigated the heavy morning traffic on I-90 with the kind of autopilot focus I usually reserved for long-haul supply runs. My phone sat on the passenger seat, buzzing every few minutes with notifications from the wedding planner and the florist, but I ignored them all. I had told Patricia I was going to inspect a structural issue at a high-rise project in the Loop, a lie that came easily because it was the kind of thing I used to do before I semi-retired. It was the kind of work she respected only because it paid the bills, not because she understood the labor involved. I pulled my truck into the parking garage of the firm Harrison & Cole. The valet looked at my F-150 with disdain, clearly used to parking Teslas and Mercedes, but I didn't care. I tossed him the keys and walked into the lobby. The building was all glass and polished marble, cold and imposing. It was a world away from the warmth of the wood and stone I had used to build my lake house, but right now, cold was exactly what I needed. I needed the cold, hard logic of the law. Harrison was waiting for me in his corner office. He was a man cut from the same cloth as me, rough around the edges, but polished by time. We had known each other for 30 years, ever since I renovated his first brownstone. He was the only lawyer I trusted because he didn't speak in riddles, he spoke in facts. He sat behind a desk that was cluttered with files, his tie loosened, and a coffee stain on his cuff. "You look like hell," Hank Harrison said, gesturing for me to sit. "I feel like hell," I replied, sinking into the leather chair. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I opened my briefcase and laid the evidence out on his desk. The printed screenshots of the text messages, the bank statements showing the dental work and the suit, the flight confirmation for Mick, and finally, the trust deed. Harrison put on his reading glasses and went through the pile. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock and the rustle of paper. I watched his face. I saw his eyebrows knit together as he read the messages about the ATM. I saw his jaw tighten when he saw the photo of Mick drinking my scotch. When he finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is brutal, Hank," he said quietly. "I have seen messy divorces. I have seen infidelity. But this is a coordinated extraction of resources. They are not just cheating on you, they are harvesting you." I know I said, my voice flat. "I want them out, Harrison. I want them out of my house. I want them out of my life. And I don't want to pay them a single dime of alimony." Harrison leaned back and sighed. "That is the tricky part. You have been married for 15 years. In Illinois, that is a long-term marriage. If you file for divorce today, just straight divorce, the court is going to look at equitable distribution. She could claim half the marital assets. She could drag this out for 2 years while living in that house, and you would be paying the mortgage the whole time." I felt the anger flare up again, hot and sharp. "I am not paying for her to live in my house with him," I said, slamming my hand on the armrest. Harrison held up a hand. "I know. That is why we are not going to lead with the divorce. We are going to lead with the trust." He pulled the deed toward him, tapping the signature line. "You were smart when you bought this land, Hank. You listened to me. You put the property into a revocable living trust with yourself as the sole trustee. Patricia is a beneficiary, yes, but her rights only trigger upon your death or incapacitation. As long as you are alive and kicking, you have total control." "So what does that mean?" I asked, leaning forward. "It means you don't need her permission to sell it," Harrison said, a small, sharp smile appearing on his face. "If this house was in both your names, you would be stuck. But it is not. It belongs to the trust, and the trust decides it is time to liquidate its assets." He picked up his phone. "I have a contact, an investment group that specializes in distressed luxury properties. They buy cash, they close fast. They don't care about inspections, and they don't care if the house is staged. They want the land and the shell." "Call them," I said without hesitation. Harrison paused, his thumb hovering over the screen. "Hank, listen to me. If we do this, we are going nuclear. Once you sign that purchase agreement, the house is gone. You are effectively making your wife homeless 3 days before her daughter's wedding." The optics of this in divorce court later. Well, it is going to look aggressive. I pointed at the photo of Mick wearing the suit I paid for. Is that not aggressive, Harrison? Is planning to replace me at the altar while spending my money not aggressive? They want to play games with appearances. I am done with appearances. I want the cash in my account, and I want the locks changed. Harrison nodded slowly. Fair enough. He dialed the number and put it on speaker. I listened as he negotiated the terms. It was brutal and efficient. The market value was $1.8 million. The investors offered $1.5 for a 24-hour close cash wire. Take it, I whispered. Harrison spoke into the phone. He will take 1.6, but the closing has to be tomorrow. And he wants a lease back for 0 days, meaning the property must be vacated immediately upon closing. There was a pause on the other end, then a voice agreed. Harrison hung up. It is done. They are emailing the pocket listing agreement now. You sign it electronically. The funds will be in the trust account by noon tomorrow. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was relief. The house that I had built, the physical symbol of my love for Patricia, was no longer a home. It was just an asset, and I had just liquidated it. Harrison's printer whirred to life, spitting out the contract. I took the pen. My hand didn't shake this time. I signed Henry Caldwell, trustee, 3 times. Now Harrison said, collecting the papers, the next step is the eviction. Since the ownership changes tomorrow, the new owners will issue a notice to vacate. But given the sensitive nature of the situation, I can have the sheriff's department there to assist with the civil standby. You don't have to be there, Hank. In fact, it is better if you are not. I will be there, I said. But not in person. I have my ways. Just as I capped the pen, my phone rang again. The screen lit up with a photo of Patricia. It was a picture I had taken of her on our 10th anniversary, windblown and laughing on a boat. It felt like looking at a stranger. I looked at Harrison. He nodded, indicating I should answer. Keep it short. Don't tip your hand. I swiped answer and put the phone to my ear. Hello, Patricia. Hank, where are you? Her voice was shrill, tight with panic. The wedding coordinator is standing right here. She says the final payment for the catering and the venue balance hasn't gone through yet. It is $45,000, Hank. They are threatening to stop setting up the tables. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. They were probably standing in the ballroom of the hotel, surrounded by flowers I was paying for screaming at some poor manager. I am at the job site, Patricia, I said, forcing my voice to sound distracted. The reception is terrible down here in the basement levels. I tried to send the wire an hour ago, but the banking app kept timing out. Well, try again, she snapped. Brittany is freaking out. She is crying, Hank. She thinks you are doing this on purpose to punish her for the seating chart thing. Punish her. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I am not punishing anyone. I said, my voice calm and steady. I am just having technical difficulties. I will drive up to the surface level and try to resend it. It might take a little while, though. The traffic is backed up and I have to meet with the structural engineer. Just get it done, Hank, she said, not even saying goodbye. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked at Harrison. She wants $45,000, I said. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Are you going to send it? I stood up and picked up my briefcase. I walked to the window and looked down at the tiny cars crawling along the street below. I turned back to my lawyer. Harrison, the only thing I am sending is a eviction notice. But I need to buy time. If they know the money isn't coming, they will come back to the house to confront me. I need them distracted. I need them chasing their tails at that venue for another 24 hours. So you are going to string them along? Harrison asked. I am going to do exactly what they did to me, I said, walking toward the door. I am going to let them believe everything is perfect right until the moment the roof caves in. I walked out of the office. The pocket listing was signed. The house was sold. The clock was ticking. I had 24 hours to clear out the things that mattered to me and disappear before the explosion. I got back into my truck and checked the time. It was noon. I had a lot of work to do. I needed to hire a moving crew, but not a regular one. I needed a crew that could work in silence and leave no trace. I started the engine. The deception was no longer theirs alone. Now it was a two-way street, and I was driving a much bigger truck. I pulled my old leather duffel bag from the top shelf of the closet, and the smell of dust and cedar filled the room. It was the same bag I used to take on long-haul contracting jobs back when I was building the business, back when I had to spend weeks away from home to put food on the table. Packing it now felt like a regression, like I was sliding backward in time to a point before I had built this life, before I had built this house. But this time I wasn't leaving to build something, I was leaving to tear it all down. Patricia stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. She was trying to look concerned, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept darting to the clock on the bedside table. She wanted me gone. She needed me gone. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Hank?" she asked, her voice pitched in that fake solicitous tone she used when she was trying to manipulate me. "Missing the wedding just to go fishing in Florida. People are going to talk." "Let them talk," I said, folding a stack of shirts with deliberate precision. "You and Brittany made it very clear. I don't fit the aesthetic. I am just a distraction. So I am removing the distraction. I am going down to the Keys. I have a buddy with a charter boat. I need to clear my head." I saw the relief wash over her face. It was instant and undeniable, like a tension headache suddenly breaking. She walked over and touched my arm. Her fingers felt cold. "Maybe it is for the best," she said. "You have been so stressed lately with the money and the planning. A break will do you good. And don't worry about the wedding. We will tell everyone you had a medical emergency. Something minor. A back spasm. It will explain why you aren't walking her down the aisle. A back spasm." That was my legacy. The man who carried this family on his back for 15 years was now being reduced to a back spasm. I zipped the bag shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "I will transfer the rest of the vendor payments when I get to the airport." I lied. "I just need to get to a secure Wi-Fi connection." "You are the best, Hank," she said, and she actually leaned in and pecked me on the cheek. It was a dry, hollow kiss. It felt like a receipt. I walked downstairs with my bag. Brittany and Tyler were in the kitchen looking at a seating chart on a laptop. They looked up as I entered. "Safe travels," Hank Tyler said, not even bothering to stand up. "Catch a big one for us." "Yeah, have fun," Brittany added. Her eyes were bright with victory. She had won. She had successfully exorcised the embarrassment from her perfect day. I looked at them one last time. I looked at the granite island where they sat. The island I had installed myself, choosing the slab for its unique vein pattern. I looked at the custom cabinets. I looked at the view of the lake through the sliding glass doors. "Goodbye," I said. I didn't say I love you. I didn't say see you soon. I just said goodbye. I walked out to my truck and threw the bag in the passenger seat. I backed out of the driveway, my tires crunching on the gravel. I drove slowly until I was out of sight of the house. Then I turned onto the main road, and instead of heading toward O'Hare Airport, I turned left toward the highway exit. I checked into a Holiday Inn Express 5 miles away. It was a nondescript beige building next to a gas station. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale air conditioning. I threw my bag on the bed and sat down at the small desk. I didn't unpack. I wasn't going to be here long. I took out my phone and opened the security app. The screen flickered to life. I had cameras everywhere. The driveway, the front porch, the kitchen, the living room. I had installed them for security, for peace of mind. I never imagined they would become my window into hell. I watched the timestamp. It had been exactly 20 minutes since I left the driveway. On the driveway camera, a car pulled up. It was a red convertible rental. Flashy, cheap. The door opened and Mick stepped out. He was wearing jeans and a leather jacket that looked like it was trying too hard to be cool. He looked at the house, my house, with a smirk that made my blood boil. He didn't knock. He didn't wait. He just walked up the steps. I switched to the front porch camera. The door opened before he even reached for the handle. Patricia was standing there. She threw her arms around him. She hugged him with a passion I hadn't felt from her in a decade. She pulled him inside. I switched to the living room camera. The feed was crisp and clear in high definition. "Welcome home, Daddy," Brittany squealed, running into the room. She hugged him, jumping up and down like a teenager. Mick laughed, a rough smoker's laugh. "Look at this place," he said, looking around. "Not bad. Not bad at all. Hank did all right for himself, didn't he?" "He is gone," Patricia said, closing the front door and locking it. "He is on his way to Florida. We have the whole week." Mick walked over to the sofa, my leather sofa, and flopped down onto it, putting his boots up on the coffee table. My coffee table. The one made of reclaimed walnut that I had sanded by hand. "Get me a drink, Patty," he said. "Top shelf. I know he has the good stuff." Patricia didn't even hesitate. She walked to the liquor cabinet. She bypassed the regular bottles and reached for the back. She pulled out the Macallan 25. My breath caught in my throat. That bottle was a gift from a client, a billionaire developer who told me I was the only honest contractor in Chicago. I was saving it. I was saving it for a special occasion, maybe for when I finally retired or when I held my first grandchild. Patricia poured a generous glass and handed it to Mick. He took a sip and grimaced, then swallowed. "Smooth," he said. "Tastes like money." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a cigar. A thick Cuban. "Hey," Tyler said, looking up from his phone. "You can't smoke in here. Hank hates smoke in the house. The smell gets into the curtains." Mick laughed. "Hank isn't here, kid. And this is my house for the week." He lit the cigar. I watched the flame flare up on the screen. He took a long drag and blew a cloud of thick blue smoke into the air. He ashed directly onto the hardwood floor. My floor. The white oak planks I had laid myself, perfectly spacing every joint. He just flicked his ash onto it like it was a gutter. "So what is the plan?" Mick asked, gesturing with the cigar. "Well," Patricia said, sitting next to him and resting her hand on his knee. "The wedding is in 3 days. We need to go over the procession. And then tonight we are having the rehearsal dinner. You are sitting at the head table, of course." "Of course," Mick said. "And the check. Did the old man transfer the money?" "He said he would do it from the airport," Patricia said. "He is clueless. He thinks he is just taking a vacation. He has no idea he is paying for his own replacement." They all laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. I zoomed in on the screen. I looked at Mick's face. The arrogance. The entitlement. He was sitting in my castle, drinking my wine, burning my floor, and laughing at my stupidity. But what hurt the most wasn't Mick. It was Brittany. She was sitting on this arm of the sofa, looking at Mick with hero worship in her eyes. She had never looked at me like that. Not when I taught her to drive. Not when I paid for her college. Not when I saved her from her own mistakes. To her, I was just the infrastructure. I was the road she walked on to get to her real destination. I was necessary, but invisible. And now that she had reached the destination, I was obsolete. I watched Mick lean over and whisper something to Patricia. She giggled and leaned her head on his shoulder. I felt a coldness settle over me. It was absolute. It was final. The last thread of hesitation I might have had, the last tiny voice in my head saying, maybe this is too harsh. Maybe I should just divorce her. Normally was silenced. They were desecrating my home. They were desecrating my life. I minimized the camera app and opened my contacts. I found the number for the investment broker, the one Harrison had set up the deal with. I pressed call. It rang twice. "Hello, Mr. Caldwell," the voice on the other end said, professional and crisp. "I am looking at the contract you sent over," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't sound like the voice of a man watching his wife cheat on him in real time. It sounded like business. "Yes, sir." "Do you have any questions about the terms?" "No questions," I said. "I just have an update. The property is currently occupied, but I am waiving the broom clean condition. You can take possession with the furniture inside. That is unusual, Mr. Caldwell, but acceptable. It simplifies things for us. We were planning to gut the interior anyway." Gut it. They were going to tear out the cabinets I built. They were going to rip up the floors I laid. "Good," I said. "Tear it all down." "And the closing date?" the broker asked. "Today," I said. "Right now. I am signing the digital document as we speak. Wire the funds." "Are you sure, sir? Once you execute this, the title transfers immediately." I looked at the video feed one last time. Mick was pouring himself another glass of my scotch. Brittany was taking a selfie with him. Patricia was rubbing his back. "I am sure," I said. I switched apps to the document signer. I tapped the signature box. I verified my identity. Sent. It was done. I went back to the call. "The contract is signed," I said. "I see it," the broker said. "We will initiate the wire transfer. It should hit your trust account within the hour." "Congratulations on the sale, Mr. Caldwell." "Thank you," I said. "One more thing." "Yes. When do you plan to secure the property?" "Well, since we own it now, we typically send a team to change the locks and secure the perimeter within 24 hours, to prevent vandalism." "Send them now," I said. "Send them tonight." "There are squatters on the premises." "Squatters?" "Yes," I said. "People who have no legal right to be there. I want them removed." "I understand," the broker said, his tone shifting to something sharper. "We have a security team for that. We will handle it." I hung up the phone. I sat back in the cheap hotel chair. I watched the screen. They were still laughing. They were still drinking. They had no idea that the roof over their heads didn't belong to me anymore. They had no idea that they were trespassing. I opened my banking app. I refreshed the page. I waited. 10 minutes later, the balance updated. $1.6 million. The house was gone. The money was safe. I watched Mick ash on the floor again. "Go ahead, Mick," I whispered to the screen. "Make a mess. It is not my floor anymore." I stood up and walked to the window of the hotel room. I looked out at the highway. I could have turned left and gone to Florida. I could have actually gone fishing. I could have let them have their wedding and just faded away into a quiet, lonely retirement. But they wanted a show. They wanted an aesthetic. Well, I was about to give them the most memorable wedding week of their lives. I picked up my phone again and texted Harrison. "Funds received. House sold. Unleash the dogs." I sat down to watch the show. I sat at the small desk in the hotel room under the buzzing fluorescent light. The laminate was peeling off the edge of the table, and there was a sticky ring from a previous guest's soda can, but I didn't mind. It felt real. It felt honest. On the laptop screen in front of me was a spreadsheet I had created months ago. It was the master list of every vendor, every contract, and every contact number for the wedding of the century. Beside the laptop was a bottle of wine I had bought at the gas station next door for $12. It was a far cry from the $200 bottles I had been expected to pay for at the reception, but as I cracked the screw top and poured it into a plastic cup, I knew it would taste better than any vintage champagne because it tasted like freedom. I took a sip. It was sharp and acidic. I set the cup down and picked up my phone. It was time to go to work. The first number on the list was Le Jardin, the venue. It was the most expensive line item on the budget. The deposit I had already paid was $40,000, and the remaining balance of $45,000 was what Patricia had been screaming about on the phone earlier. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before being picked up. Le Jardin Events, this is Jean-Paul speaking. How may I be of assistance? I knew Jean-Paul. He was a man who wore suits that were too tight and spoke with a fake French accent that disappeared when he was angry. He had looked down his nose at me every time we met, treating me like the hired help instead of the man signing the checks. Jean-Paul, this is Henry Caldwell. Ah, Monsieur Caldwell. Jean-Paul said, his voice dripping with false charm. We were just speaking with your wife. She was quite distressed about the wire transfer. I trust you are calling to provide the confirmation number so we can proceed with the table settings. Not exactly. Jean-Paul, I said, leaning back in the uncomfortable chair. I am calling to inform you that I am exercising my right as the primary guarantor to cancel the contract effective immediately. There was a silence on the other line. A long, heavy silence. I beg your pardon, Monsieur Caldwell, Jean-Paul said, his accent slipping slightly. The wedding is in 3 days. The food has been ordered. The staff has been scheduled. You cannot cancel. The cancellation fee is 100% of the total cost. I know the contract, Jean-Paul, I said. I read it. Clause 14, Section B states that in the event of a cancellation, the deposit is forfeited. You have my $40,000. You can keep it. But I am revoking the authorization for the remaining balance. Do not run my card. Do not expect a wire. The event is off. But Monsieur Jean-Paul sputtered, his voice rising an octave. This is irregular. We have a contract. We will sue. You can try, I said calmly. But my lawyers will tie you up in court for years. And frankly, Jean-Paul, I don't think you want a discovery process where we look into your billing practices. I noticed you charged me for 300 bottles of water that were never delivered at the tasting. Jean-Paul went quiet. Now listen to me carefully, Jean-Paul, I said, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. This is the important part. I am not canceling the wedding because I am angry. I am canceling it because I am moving it. Moving it? Jean-Paul asked, confused. Yes, it is a surprise, a father's gift. I have arranged for a private estate in Lake Geneva. It is going to be much more exclusive. But here is the thing, Jean-Paul. If you call my wife or my daughter and tell them I canceled, they will panic. They will think the wedding is ruined. You need to keep this quiet. When they show up on Saturday morning, simply have the doors locked. I will handle the rest. I will explain that it was part of the surprise. Jean-Paul hesitated. He was greedy, but he was also afraid of conflict. If you stay silent, I continued, I will not leave a negative review about the water bottles. I will let you keep the $40,000 deposit for doing absolutely nothing. That is pure profit for you, Jean-Paul. Easy money. All you have to do is keep your mouth shut and keep the doors locked. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. $40,000 for zero work. It was a crooked businessman's dream. Very well, Monsieur Caldwell, he said slowly. We will mark the date as cancelled in our internal system. We will not contact the bride. But if they show up here, if they show up, just tell them there was a facility issue, I said. Tell them a pipe burst. Tell them anything. Just don't let them in. Au revoir, Monsieur Caldwell. I hung up, one down. The biggest domino had just fallen. I took another sip of the cheap wine. It tasted a little smoother now. Next on the list was the florist. Petals and Thorns, a trendy boutique in the West Loop that charged $10 for a single rose stem. The bill was $12,000. I dialed. A breathless young woman answered. Petals and Thorns, this is Chloe. Chloe, this is Henry Caldwell. I am calling about the order for the Caldwell wedding on Saturday. Oh, hi, Mr. Caldwell, Chloe chirped. We are just prepping the peonies now. They are gorgeous. We had them flown in from Holland this morning. That sounds expensive, Chloe, I said. It is, but it is worth it, she said. Brittany is going to die when she sees them. Well, I hope not, I said. Listen, Chloe, I have a change of plans. I need to cancel the order. Cancel. Chloe gasped. Mr. Caldwell, the flowers are already cut. They are here. We can't return them to Holland. I understand, I said. I am not asking for a refund. You have my deposit of $6,000. Keep it. You want us to keep $6,000 for nothing? Chloe asked, sounded baffled. Yes. But here is the instruction. Do not deliver the flowers. Do not bring them to the venue. In fact, I want you to take all those peonies and donate them to the local nursing home. Brighten up the day for some old folks who will actually appreciate them. But Brittany doesn't know I cut her off. It is a surprise. We are going with a different aesthetic, a minimalist theme. No flowers. If you show up with a truckload of peonies, you will ruin the surprise. A minimalist theme, Chloe repeated, sounding doubtful. Trust me, Chloe. It is all the rage in Europe. Just donate the flowers. Send me a tax receipt for the donation. And do not call Brittany. I want to see the look on her face when she sees the new design. Okay, Mr. Caldwell, she said uncertainly. If you are sure. I am sure. Donate them. Today. I hung up. I imagined the nursing home residents waking up tomorrow, surrounded by $12,000 worth of imported peonies. It made me smile. At least someone would get some joy out of my money. I looked at the list again. The caterer. The elite palate. This one was personal. Tyler had insisted on the lobster bisque and the filet mignon, even though I had suggested a nice prime rib. He said prime rib was too banquet hall. He wanted plated service. He wanted white glove waiters. I dialed. Elite palate reservations. I need to speak to the owner, I said. This is Hank Caldwell. Hold, please. A moment later, a gruff voice came on the line. Mr. Caldwell, we are prepping the lobster stock. What can I do for you? Stop the stock, I said. Excuse me. Stop cooking. Turn off the ovens. The event is canceled. Mr. Caldwell, we have 300 pounds of lobster tail sitting in the walk-in. We have 50 cases of vintage Cabernet. You can't just cancel. I just did, I said. Check your contract. Check your offsong. I paid 50% up front. That covers your food cost. The rest is labor and service. Since you won't be serving, you don't need the labor. Send the staff home. You are leaving me with a freezer full of lobster, the owner said, angry. Have a staff party, I suggested. Eat like kings. But do not show up at Le Jardin on Saturday, and do not call my wife. Why not, the owner asked, suspicious. Because I am moving the reception, I said, using the lie again. It is a surprise location. We have a private chef arranging a different menu. If you call her, you will spoil the surprise, and I will be very unhappy. You have your money, you have the food. Just walk away. There was a grumble on the other end. Rich people are crazy, the owner muttered. You have no idea, I said. I hung up. I sat back and looked at the spreadsheet. I highlighted the rows for venue florist and caterer. I clicked the fill color button and turned them red. Red for canceled. Red for stop. Red for danger. There were other smaller vendors. The string quartet, the videographer, the photo booth rental. I called them one by one. I told them all the same thing. Canceled. Keep the deposit. Don't tell the bride it is a surprise. It took me 2 hours. By the time I was done, the sun had gone down completely, and the streetlights were buzzing outside the hotel window. My throat was dry from talking. The bottle of cheap wine was half empty. I looked at the phone. It was silent. No angry calls from Patricia. No hysterical texts from Brittany. It was working. The lie about the surprise was holding, or maybe the vendors were just too happy to keep the deposits without doing the work, to ask too many questions. Greed is a powerful silencer. I imagined what was happening at the house right now. Mick was probably drunk on my scotch, telling stories about his glory days. Brittany was probably modeling her veil in front of the mirror, dreaming of her big entrance. Patricia was probably sleeping soundly, thinking she had pulled it off, thinking she had secured the money and the lifestyle and the boyfriend all at once. They were celebrating a victory that had already been snatched away. They were standing on a trapdoor, and I had just pulled the lever. The drop hadn't happened yet, gravity hadn't kicked in, but there was nothing holding them up anymore. I took a long drink of the wine. It tasted like grape juice and rubbing alcohol, but in that moment, it was the best thing I had ever tasted. I felt a strange lightness in my shoulders. For 15 years, I had carried the weight of being the provider, the weight of being the responsible one, the weight of trying to buy love that was never for sale. I put the phone down on the peeling laminate. I looked at the red rose on my spreadsheet. "It is done," I whispered to the empty room. I wasn't Hank the ATM anymore. I wasn't Hank the wallet. I wasn't Hank the stepdad who wasn't good enough for the photos. I was just Hank. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. I closed the laptop. I turned off the buzzing fluorescent light. I sat in the dark watching the headlights of the cars on the highway rushing toward destinations I didn't care about. I had nowhere to be, no one to take care of, no bills to pay. I finished the wine and lay back on the stiff hotel bed. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. Tomorrow, the movers would arrive at the house. Tomorrow, the locks would change. But for tonight, I was going to sleep. And for the first time in years, I knew I would sleep without dreaming of falling. The cheap hotel room was cold, and the pizza I had ordered sat greasy and untouched in the box next to me. I could hear the highway traffic outside, a constant drone of tires on asphalt that usually helped me sleep. But tonight, it sounded like a warning. I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open, the screen glowing in the darkness. It was Friday night, the night before the wedding. By all traditions, I should have been at the rehearsal dinner. I should have been making a toast to the happy couple. I should have been shaking hands with relatives and paying the final tips to the servers. Instead, I was miles away watching my life unfold on a 13-inch screen like a bad reality television show. I had kept the security feed running. It was my only connection to the world I had left behind, and it was a form of self-torture I couldn't seem to stop. On the screen, the living room of the lake house was bathed in the warm golden light of the chandelier I had hung myself, standing on a 20-foot ladder, while Patricia held the base, terrified I would fall. The room was full of people. Tyler's parents were there, looking stiff and uncomfortable on the furniture. A few of Brittany's bridesmaids were lounging on the rug. And in the center of it all, holding court like a king in a castle he had just conquered, was Mick. He was wearing the suit, the custom navy tuxedo from Milano Menswear, the one I had paid $3,000 for. It fit him perfectly. I had to give the tailor credit, he knew how to hide a beer gut. Mick was holding a crystal flute of champagne, my champagne, the vintage Dom Perignon I had been saving for New Year's Eve, and he was gesturing wildly as he told a story. I turned up the volume on my laptop. The microphone on the camera was sensitive enough to pick up the clinking of glasses and the fake laughter of the guests. And I tell you, Mick was saying, his voice slurring slightly, not from emotion, but from the alcohol. I tell you, parenting is not about the money. It is not about writing checks. Anyone can write a check, right? There was a murmur of agreement from the room. I saw Tyler nod, sipping his drink. Parenting is about soul. Mick continued, tapping his chest. It is about connection. Blood calls to blood. That is why I am here. That is why I am walking my baby girl down the aisle tomorrow. Because when it counts, the real father shows up. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. The real father shows up. He had shown up 3 days ago. I had been there for 15 years. I had been there for the flu. I had been there for the heartbreak when her high school boyfriend dumped her. I had been there to teach her how to parallel park. But apparently, none of that was soul. That was just logistics. Brittany beamed at him, wiping a tear from her eye. "Oh, Daddy," she said. "That is so beautiful." Mick grinned, showing off the $5,000 veneers I had bought. "And let me tell you something else," he said, lowering his voice to a stage whisper that the camera picked up perfectly. "This house, this beautiful house, it is a testament to what family can achieve. And you know what? Once the wedding is over and things settle down, I think we really need to look at the assets here." I leaned closer to the screen. What was he saying? "Hank is getting old," Mick said, and I saw Patricia stiffen slightly, but she didn't stop him. "He is slowing down. This place is too much for him to manage. The maintenance, the taxes. I was telling Patty here that maybe it is time to convince him to sell, downsize him to a condo, and then we can use the equity to really set up Brittany and Tyler for the future. Maybe buy a vacation place in Cabo. A family compound." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just about the wedding. It never was. It was about the harvest. They were planning to put me out to pasture. They were discussing stripping my assets while drinking my wine. I watched Patricia. I waited for her to say no. I waited for her to say that this was Hank's house, that he built it with his own hands, that he loved this lake. Instead, she smiled a weak, conspiratorial smile. "We can talk about it later," she said softly. "Let's just get through tomorrow first. Once the wedding is paid for, we will have more leverage." Leverage. That was the word that broke the final beam. She didn't see me as a husband. She saw me as an obstacle to be leveraged, a problem to be solved. I sat back on the hotel bed. My hands were numb. I looked at the red numbers on the digital clock. It was 10 p.m. In 12 hours, Brittany was supposed to walk down the aisle. I had already canceled everything. The venue was locked. The flowers were gone. The food was in the trash. But they didn't know that yet. They were still living in the fantasy. I picked up my phone. I stared at Patricia's name on the screen. I needed to know. I needed to be 100% sure. There is a rule in carpentry: measure twice, cut once. You never make a cut you can't undo until you are absolutely certain the measurements are right. I had measured their betrayal a dozen times, but I needed one final check. I needed to give her one last chance to be a decent human being. I typed a text message. My thumbs hovered over the glass screen. "Patricia, I am sitting here alone in a hotel room. I am thinking about us, about the last 15 years. Are you sure about tomorrow? Are you sure you want me to stay away? I can come back. I can drive through the night. I can be there to support you. But I need to know that you want me there. Not my money, me." I hit send. I watched the screen of my laptop. I saw Patricia feel the vibration of her phone in her clutch. She pulled it out. She frowned, reading the message. I saw her look at Mick. He was laughing at some joke Tyler made holding court. She looked at Brittany, who was radiant in the center of the room. She looked at the house. Then she looked down at her phone. Her fingers moved quickly. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look conflicted. She typed the reply and put the phone back in her bag. My phone buzzed. I looked at the message. "Hank, please stop making this about you. We have discussed this. It is Brittany's wish. For the sake of her happiness and the peace of the family, do not come. Stay in Florida. We will talk next week about the bills. Just let us have this day. Talk next week about the bills." I put the phone down on the nightstand. I turned it off. I didn't just put it on silent, I powered it down completely. I looked at the laptop screen one last time. Mick was pouring another drink. Brittany was hugging him. Patricia was laughing. They looked like a happy family. They looked like they had won. But I knew something they didn't. I knew that the security team from the investment firm was scheduled to arrive at 8 a.m. sharp. I knew that the venue was closed. I knew that the checks were going to bounce. I was the structural engineer of their lives, and I had just condemned the building. I closed the laptop. The room plunged into darkness save for the sliver of light coming from under the hotel room door. "You want peace, Patricia," I whispered to the empty room. "You want me to stay away? Okay." I lay back on the pillows. I thought about the house one last time. I thought about the day I poured the foundation. It was a hot July day, and I had worked for 14 hours straight, smoothing the concrete, ensuring it was level, ensuring it would last for 100 years. I loved that house. I loved the way the morning light hit the kitchen tiles. I loved the smell of the cedar closet. But a house is just wood and stone. A home is the people inside it. And the people inside it were strangers to me now. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. The winds were howling all around me. The destruction was imminent. But right here, right now, there was silence. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a hot emotion. It burns energy. What I felt was cold. It was the cold of a calculated business decision. I had liquidated a bad asset. I had cut my losses. Tomorrow morning the sun would rise. And when it did, their world would end. I pulled the scratchy hotel blanket up to my chin. I closed my eyes. I slept. And for the first time in months, I didn't dream about drowning. I dreamed about the open road. I dreamed about driving my truck west toward the desert, where the land is empty and clean and honest. The storm was coming, and I was the one bringing the rain. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and cold, with the kind of sharp, clear light that photographers usually beg for. From my hotel room window, I watched the sunrise and drank a cup of black coffee. It was the best coffee I had tasted in years, because it didn't come with a side order of guilt or manipulation. I imagined the scene at the lake house. I knew exactly what was happening, because I had orchestrated the silence. The limousines I was supposed to have paid for never arrived. The hair and makeup team I was supposed to have secured never knocked on the door. They were probably scrambling now, calling Ubers and driving their own cars, rushing to the venue in a panic, assuming it was just a scheduling error. I checked the time. It was 9 o'clock. They would be arriving at Le Jardin right about now. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew Jean-Paul. I knew he was a man who hated confrontation almost as much as he loved money. He would have the doors locked tight. He would have the blinds drawn. At the venue, the scene was unfolding exactly as I had calculated. Brittany arrived in an Uber XL wearing a white silk robe with the word bride embroidered on the back in gold thread. Her hair was in rollers and her face was bare, waiting for the professional makeup artist who was supposed to meet them there. Patricia was with her, clutching her phone, looking pale and stressed. They stepped out onto the sidewalk expecting a valet, expecting a red carpet, expecting the world to bow down to their aesthetic. Instead, they found a locked glass door and an empty parking lot. Brittany marched up to the entrance and pulled on the handle. It didn't budge. She pulled again harder, rattling the glass in its frame. "Mom!" she screamed, her voice shrill and tight. "It is locked! Why is it locked? The vendors are supposed to be setting up." Patricia hurried over her heels, clicking on the pavement. She peered through the glass. It was dark inside. The ballroom was empty. There were no tables set, no linens, no crystal. "Maybe they are using the side entrance," Patricia said, her voice trembling. "Maybe they are in the back." They ran around the building to the loading dock. It was closed. The heavy metal rolling door was pulled down and padlocked. Panic began to set in. Real panic. The kind that makes your hands shake and your breath come short. "Where are the flowers?" Brittany yelled. "Where is the florist?" Chloe said she was bringing the peonies at 8. There were no flowers. There was no truck. The loading zone was desolate. Patricia pulled out her phone and dialed Jean-Paul. It went straight to voicemail. She dialed the florist. Voicemail. She dialed the caterer. Voicemail. Then the front door of the venue opened just a crack. Jean-Paul slipped out. He didn't open the door wide enough to let them in. He stood in the gap, blocking the entrance with his body. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo. He was wearing a casual polo shirt and jeans, the uniform of a man who was not working today. Jean-Paul, Patricia cried, rushing toward him. Thank God. What is going on? We are late. The makeup artist isn't here and the doors are locked. Let us in. Jean-Paul held up a hand. Madame Caldwell, I am afraid I cannot let you in. The venue is closed today. Closed, Brittany shrieked. What do you mean closed? It is my wedding day. We have a contract. We had a contract, Jean-Paul corrected her, his tone cool and detached. But that contract was cancelled yesterday evening. Cancelled? Patricia gasped. By who? By the guarantor, Jean-Paul said. By Monsieur Caldwell. He contacted us personally. He revoked the credit card authorization and formally cancelled the event. He was quite specific, Madame. He said the wedding was off. Patricia staggered back as if she had been slapped. No, she whispered. No, that is a mistake. He is in Florida. He is fishing. He said he was going to transfer the money. He did not transfer the money, Jean-Paul said. He cancelled the booking. And since the balance was not paid and the contract was voided, we have released the staff. There is no chef. There is no service team. There is no wedding. Jean-Paul stepped back inside and closed the door. The lock clicked with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the morning air. Brittany stood frozen on the sidewalk. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. She looked at her mother. She looked at the empty street. Mom, she wheezed. Mom, fix this. Call him. Call Hank. Patricia's fingers were fumbling with her phone. She dialed my number. I watched my phone on the hotel nightstand. It lit up. Patricia calling. I took a sip of coffee. I let it ring. At the venue, Patricia listened to the ringing tone until it clicked over to voicemail. She dialed again and again. He is not answering, she sobbed. He is not picking up. Just then, a sleek black sports car pulled up to the curb. It was Tyler. He stepped out looking frantic. He wasn't dressed yet, carrying his suit in a garment bag. What is going on? He shouted, slamming the car door. The band just called me. They said they aren't coming. They said the contract was pulled, and the limo company said the booking was deleted. Why are you guys standing on the sidewalk? Hank canceled it. Patricia wept. She slumped against the brick wall of the building, sliding down until she was crouching on the pavement. He canceled everything. The venue, the food, the flowers. It is all gone. Tyler stared at her. His face went through a rapid transformation. The worry vanished, replaced by a cold, hard fury. What do you mean he canceled it? Tyler snarled. You told me he paid. You told me the money was handled. He lied to me, Patricia cried. He said it was a computer error. He said he was fixing it. Tyler threw his garment bag onto the ground. The expensive fabric hit the dirty concrete. So there is no wedding, he asked, his voice rising. There is no reception. There is no open bar. No, Patricia whispered. Tyler turned to look at Mick, who had just arrived in his rental convertible. Mick looked hungover, his eyes bloodshot behind sunglasses. He stepped out of the car holding a coffee cup, looking confused. Hey, what is the holdup? Mick asked. Why is everyone outside? It is freezing. You, Tyler pointed a finger at Mick. You pay for it. What? Mick asked, blinking. You are the dad, right? Tyler shouted, stepping into Mick's personal space. You are the big man with the soul connection. You are the one walking her down the aisle. So you pay for it. Fix this. Get your credit card out and pay the man to open the doors. Mick laughed nervously, backing away. Whoa, kid, calm down. I don't have that kind of limit. I am just here for the moral support. Hank is the money guy. Moral support, Tyler spat. Moral support doesn't buy lobster. Moral support doesn't rent a ballroom. You are useless. Both of you. Tyler turned to Brittany. She was crying now, mascara running down her bare cheeks, ruining the aesthetic she had tried so hard to protect. Tyler, do something, she pleaded, reaching for his arm. We can go somewhere else. We can figure this out. Figure it out. Tyler scoffed, pulling his arm away. With what money, Brittany? Your dad is broke. Your mom is broke. And apparently your stepdad finally woke up and cut you off. Do you think I am going to pay for this? Do you think I have $80,000 sitting around to clean up your family's mess? He looked at them with pure disgust. It wasn't the look of a man in love. It was the look of a man who realized his investment had just crashed to zero. I am not doing this, Tyler said. I am not standing here on the side of the road like a beggar while our guests show up and laugh at us. Guests. As if on cue, the first cars began to turn into the lot. It was the early arrivals, the distant cousins, the investors Tyler had invited to impress. They rolled down their windows looking confused at the sight of the bridal party, standing on the sidewalk in robes and jeans, arguing next to a locked building. I saw them looking, Patricia wailed, covering her face with her hands. They are looking at us. Brittany stood there, shivering in the cold wind, her silk robe flapping around her legs. She looked at the locked doors of Le Jardin. She looked at her mother, crouching on the ground. She looked at her biological father hiding behind his rental car to avoid the confrontation. And then she looked at her phone. She looked at the text messages she had sent me yesterday, the ones telling me to stay away, the ones telling me I wasn't needed. She realized then that she had gotten exactly what she asked for. I wasn't there. I wasn't coming to save her. I wasn't coming to pull out my black card and make the problem go away. The humiliation was total. It was public. And it was irreversible. Tyler picked up his suit from the ground. He didn't look at Brittany. He walked back to his car. Where are you going? Brittany screamed. Tyler, come back. I am going home, Tyler said, opening his door. I am done. This is a circus and I am not a clown. He got in and revved the engine, peeling out of the lot, leaving them stranded. The guests who had arrived were now getting out of their cars, whispering, pointing, taking photos. The scene was chaotic. A bride in curlers sobbing on the curb. A mother having a breakdown against a brick wall. A father who couldn't pay for a cup of coffee, let alone a wedding. I put my coffee cup down on the hotel table. I didn't feel joy exactly, but I felt a sense of balance. The scales had tipped back. They wanted an aesthetic. Well, I had given them one. It was the aesthetic of consequence. But the show wasn't over yet. Because while they were dealing with the locked doors of the venue, they didn't know that another set of doors was about to be locked. The doors to the house. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The demolition was proceeding ahead of schedule. The drive from the venue back to the house must have been the longest 20 minutes of their lives. I sat in my hotel room watching the security monitors, waiting for the final act to begin. I had finished my coffee and moved on to water, trying to wash away the bitter taste of satisfaction. It is a strange thing to watch the people you once loved panic. You expect to feel guilty. You expect to feel a pang of regret. But as I watched Patricia's car swerve recklessly into the driveway, kicking up gravel, followed closely by Tyler's sports car and Mick's rental, I felt nothing but the cold certainty of a job well done. They slammed their car doors shut. The silence of the lakefront was shattered by their voices. Patricia was still crying, a high, thin sound that grated on my nerves even through the speakers. Brittany was shouting at Tyler, who looked like he was ready to punch a hole in the siding of the house. Mick brought up the rear, walking slowly, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal sensing a snare. They rushed up the front steps. Patricia was fumbling in her purse for her keys. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped them twice. The metal jingled on the stone pavers. "Open the door!" Mom Brittany screamed. "We need to call the police. We need to call a lawyer. Hank has lost his mind. He can't just cancel a wedding. I am going to sue him for emotional distress." Patricia finally got the key into the lock. She turned it. Nothing happened. She turned it again, harder this time, twisting it with enough force to bend the brass. The lock didn't budge. "It is stuck," Patricia gasped, rattling the handle. "It won't turn." "Let me do it," Tyler shoved her aside. He grabbed the handle and threw his shoulder against the heavy oak door. It was solid. I had installed that door myself. It was reinforced with a steel core. It wasn't going to give way to a stockbroker's shoulder. "It is jammed," Tyler yelled. It wasn't jammed, it was changed. Just then the door opened from the inside. But it wasn't me standing there. And it wasn't a burglar. It was Jim Miller, the county sheriff. Jim and I had played high school football together 50 years ago. He was a good man, a man who respected property rights and legal contracts. Standing next to him was a young man in a sharp gray suit holding a clipboard. That would be Mr. Henderson, the representative for the investment group. Patricia froze her hand, still reaching for the doorknob. "Sheriff Miller," she stammered. "Thank God you are here. Hank has locked us out. He is having a breakdown. You need to let us in." Jim looked at her with a face made of stone. He didn't smile. He didn't offer sympathy. He stepped out onto the porch, forcing them to back down the stairs. "Mrs. Caldwell," Jim said, his voice deep and authoritative, "you need to step away from the door." What Brittany asked. "What do you mean?" "We live here. This is our house." "Not anymore," Jim said. He nodded to Mr. Henderson. The man in the gray suit stepped forward and handed Patricia a folded stack of papers. "Mrs. Caldwell, my name is David Henderson. I represent Lakefront Capital Partners. As of yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m., this property was sold. We are the legal owners of this estate." "Sold." Patricia whispered the word, leaving her lips like a ghost. "That is impossible. The house is in a trust. Hank can't sell it without me. Actually, he can," Mr. Henderson said, tapping the clipboard. "We reviewed the trust documents extensively. Mr. Caldwell had sole revocation rights. He exercised those rights. The title has been transferred. The funds have been wired. This house is no longer the property of the Caldwell family." Brittany lunged forward. "You are lying. My dad wouldn't do that. He loves this house. Your stepfather vacated the premises yesterday." Mr. Henderson continued, ignoring her outburst. "As part of the sale agreement, he stipulated immediate possession. That means the house must be empty." "Empty!" Patricia shrieked. "But all our things are in there. My jewelry, Brittany's wedding gifts, my clothes. Your personal effects have been boxed and moved," Mr. Henderson said calmly. "They are currently in a storage unit in town. Here is the key and the address." He handed a small brass key to Patricia. She stared at it as if it were a poisonous spider. "This is insane," Tyler shouted. "You can't just kick people out of their home without notice. There are eviction laws. You need 30 days. "Usually, yes," Jim interrupted, stepping forward again, his hand resting casually on his belt near his badge. "But this isn't a standard tenancy. Mr. Caldwell provided proof that there was no lease agreement, and given the immediate transfer of ownership, you are technically trespassing as of this morning. The new owners have asked for the property to be secured. I am here to enforce that." "Trespassing," Mick piped up from the back. He had been quiet until now, hiding behind a pillar. Jim looked at Mick. His eyes narrowed. "I know you," Jim said. "I ran your plates when you pulled up. You are Mick Davidson. You have 2 outstanding warrants for unpaid child support in Wisconsin." Mick's face went pale. The arrogance he had worn all week vanished instantly, replacing the swagger with the twitchy fear of a career loser. "Look," Officer Mick stammered, backing toward his rental car. "I am just a guest here. I didn't know anything about a sale. I am just leaving." "You are not leaving," Brittany cried, turning to him. "Daddy, you have to help us. Tell them you are walking me down the aisle." Mick looked at Brittany, then he looked at the sheriff. He did the math. On one side was a daughter he barely knew, who was now homeless and broke. On the other side was a jail cell. "Sorry, kid," Mick said, not making eye contact. "I can't get involved with cops. I have things to do. Good luck with the wedding." He didn't even hug her. He turned and sprinted to his car. He jumped in, fumbled with the keys, and peeled out of the driveway, spraying gravel onto Brittany's wedding robe. Brittany watched him go. The man she had chosen over me. The man she wanted for the aesthetic. He had abandoned her again at the first sign of trouble. "Daddy," she screamed, but the red convertible was already disappearing around the bend. She turned back to Tyler, sobbing, reaching for him. "Tyler, he left me. He left me. But we still have each other, right? We can go to your parents' house. We can figure this out." Tyler took a step back. He looked at the closed door of the house. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at the storage unit key in Patricia's hand. And then he looked at Brittany. He saw the future. He saw a future with no dowry, no inheritance, no lake house, and a mother-in-law who was a financial liability. He was a stockbroker. He knew when to dump a toxic asset. "No." Tyler said, his voice cold and flat. "I don't think so, Brittany." "What?" Brittany gasped, wiping black mascara from her cheeks. "You people are a disaster," Tyler said, shaking his head. "You lied to me. You told me Hank was on board. You told me the money was secure. You told me I was marrying into a legacy." "I didn't know," Brittany wailed. "You should have known," Tyler snapped. "You treated the guy like dirt and you expected him to just keep paying. That is not just mean, it is stupid. And I don't marry stupid." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his car keys. "The wedding is off," Tyler announced. "Don't call me. And tell your mom to lose my number." "Tyler, wait," Patricia pleaded, grabbing his sleeve. "We can fix this. Hank will come back. He always comes back." "This is just a tantrum," Lady Tyler said, pulling his arm free with a sneer. "He sold the house. That is not a tantrum. That is a liquidation. He is gone. And so am I." Tyler got into his sports car. He reversed smoothly, demonstrating the kind of control he lacked in his character, and drove away. He didn't look back. Now there were just 2 of them, Patricia and Brittany, the mother and the daughter. The 2 women who had plotted against me in my own kitchen, who had mocked my clothes and my hands and my job. They stood alone on the gravel driveway. The wind whipped off the lake, cold and biting, cutting through their thin clothes. Patricia turned back to the sheriff. "My son. Jim, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please, let me in. It is freezing. We have nowhere to go. Just let me into the kitchen to make a call." Jim shook his head slowly. "I can't do that, Patricia. The locks have been changed. The alarm is set. You need to leave." "But where will we go?" she sobbed. Jim pointed down the road. "The storage unit is on Main Street. Your stuff is there. As for where you sleep, that is not my problem. You should have thought about that before you tried to play Hank for a fool." Jim turned and walked back inside the house, closing the heavy door with a final thud. The sound echoed across the water. I watched on the monitor as Patricia fell to her knees on the porch. She pounded on the wood with her fists, screaming my name. "Hank," she screamed. Hank opened the door. "I am sorry. I am sorry." Brittany sat down on the steps, pulling her knees to her chest, wrapping her silk bride robe around herself, shivering violently. She looked like a child, a lost, broken child. I watched them for a long time. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. They cried until they had no tears left. They screamed until their voices were hoarse. But the door didn't open. The house stood silent and imposing, a fortress of stone and wood that I had built to protect them, but which now stood as a monument to their betrayal. I felt a heavy weight lift off my chest. It was the weight of obligation, the weight of being the nice guy, the weight of being the ATM. It was gone. They were finally facing the reality they had tried so hard to avoid. A reality where actions have consequences, where money has to be earned, and where love cannot be counterfeited. I reached out and closed the laptop. The screen went black, cutting off the image of their misery. I didn't need to watch anymore. The lesson had been delivered. I stood up and stretched. My back felt good. No spasms, no pain. I picked up my duffel bag. I checked the room one last time to make sure I hadn't left anything behind. I walked to the door of the hotel room and opened it. The bright fluorescent light of the hallway flooded in. It was time to check out. It was time to get in my truck and drive. Florida sounded nice, but maybe I would go further. Maybe Arizona. Maybe Montana. Somewhere with big skies and honest work. I walked out, and the door clicked shut behind me. Locked. I smiled. I liked the sound of locking doors. It sounded like closure. The heavy oak door swung open with a groan, exposing the interior of the house to the cold morning light. Sheriff Miller stood aside, holding the door, his face impassive. "You have 10 minutes, Patricia," he said, checking his watch. "Grab your personal essentials and get out. The movers have already cleared the furniture, but the new owners said your boxes are stacked in the mudroom." Patricia stepped over the threshold, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I wasn't there to see it, but I know exactly what she saw, because I had left it that way. The house was a skeleton. The custom leather sofas were gone. The Persian rugs were rolled up and removed. The art on the walls had been taken down, leaving only pale, rectangular outlines where the sun hadn't faded the paint. The house felt massive and hollow, the echo of her footsteps bouncing off the walls emphasizing the emptiness. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a structure of wood and drywall waiting for the wrecking ball. She walked past the living room where Mick had sat drinking my scotch just the night before. The liquor cabinet was empty, the doors hanging open. She walked into the kitchen, the heart of the home, the place where she and Brittany had sat drinking coffee and plotting to erase me from the wedding photos. The granite island stretched out before her, vast and cold. I had cleared everything off the counters. The toaster, the coffee maker, the knife block. It was all gone, except for one thing. Sitting in the exact center of the kitchen island was a single white envelope. It was heavy cream-colored stationery, the kind I used for official business correspondence. I had written her name on the front in black ink. Patricia. Just her name. No title. No terms of affection. She walked toward it, drawn by the only object left in the room. Her hands were shaking as she reached out. She picked it up. It wasn't sealed. She slid the contents out onto the cold stone. There were 3 pieces of paper inside. The first was a bank statement. I had highlighted the transactions in neon yellow. The $5,000 transfer to Dental Artistry. The $3,000 charge at Milano Menswear. The flight bookings for American Airlines. I had written a note in the margin in my blocky architectural handwriting. I hope his teeth look good in the photos. I hope the suit fits. Because they cost you a husband. The second piece of paper was a high-resolution color printout. It was the screenshot from her iPad. The text message exchange with Mick. The words were blown up large enough so she couldn't miss them. Hank is just an ATM. He pays, we play. I can imagine the color draining from her face as she read those words. The realization that I hadn't just left because of a seating chart or a disagreement. I had left because I saw her. I saw the real her beneath the makeup and the charm. I saw the calculation. I saw the contempt. For years, she had thought she was the smart one playing the dumb contractor for a fool. But in that silent kitchen, staring at the proof of her own treachery, she finally understood that the ATM had a camera and it had been recording everything. The third piece of paper was a check. It was a cashier's check drawn from my personal account. I had made it out to Patricia Caldwell. The amount was exactly $1. In the memo line where I usually wrote things like mortgage or tuition or gift, I had written a single sentence. The true market value of your love. $1. It wasn't enough to buy a cup of coffee. It wasn't enough to buy a newspaper. It was an insult. It was a final valuation. After 15 years of marriage, after hundreds of thousands of dollars in support, after building her a life of comfort, this was what it all amounted to. $1. She stood there in the empty kitchen clutching that check. The silence of the house must have been deafening. Outside, the wind was howling off the lake, but inside it was the silence of a tomb. She had lost the house. She had lost the lifestyle. She had lost the husband. And all she had to show for it was a piece of paper worth 100 cents. Sheriff Miller's voice boomed from the hallway. "Time is up, Patricia. Let's go." She dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor, scattering like dead leaves. She didn't pick them up. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving the check on the floor. She walked out of the house and down the steps to where her boxes were waiting. She had nothing left but her clothes and the bitter taste of regret. 3 months later. The engine of my Earth Roamer R5 hummed with a steady, powerful rhythm as I navigated the winding roads of Route 66. The landscape outside my window was a vast expanse of red rock and blue sky. The Grand Canyon was just ahead, a massive gash in the earth that made all human problems seem insignificant by comparison. I pulled into a dispersed camping spot on the north rim, far away from the tourists and the noise. I parked the rig near the edge of a cliff where the view stretched out for 100 miles. I killed the engine. The silence here was different than the silence in the empty house. This was a peaceful silence, a clean silence. It was the sound of freedom. I stepped out of the RV and set up my camp chair. I poured myself a cup of coffee from a French press. It was hot and strong. I took a deep breath of the dry desert air, smelling the sagebrush and the pine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from Chicago. I knew who it was. They had been trying to call me from different numbers for weeks. Sometimes it was Patricia crying and apologizing, saying she made a mistake. Sometimes it was Brittany screaming that I had ruined her life, that she was living in a studio apartment and working as a waitress. Sometimes it was lawyers threatening to sue only to disappear when Harrison sent them the trust documents. I looked at the screen. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt indifferent. I pressed the block button. I put the phone down on the small table next to me. I looked out at the canyon. The sun was setting, painting the rocks in shades of purple and gold. It was the most beautiful aesthetic I had ever seen, and it didn't cost a dime. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. I thought about the man I was 3 months ago, the man sitting at table 9 by the kitchen door, the man worried about what people would think, the man trying to buy respect. That man was gone. He had died in that hotel room in Chicago. The man sitting here now was Henry Caldwell, just Henry, and Henry was doing just fine. I turn to look at the camera, to look at you, the person listening to this story. If you are listening to this and you see yourself in my story, listen to me closely. You cannot buy love. You cannot buy respect. And you certainly cannot buy family. If you are the one writing the checks, if you are the one solving all the problems, and yet you are the one being disrespected, then you are not a provider. You are a prey. They will call you names when you stop paying. They will call you selfish. They will call you cruel. They will try to gaslight you into believing that their survival is your responsibility. It is not. Your only responsibility is to your own dignity. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't make you a father and a marriage license doesn't make you a husband. Those are titles that are earned through mutual respect and shared sacrifice. If the sacrifice is all one-sided, then it is not a relationship, it is a robbery. Don't be afraid to walk away. Don't be afraid to cancel the wedding. Don't be afraid to sell the house. The things you own end up owning you. And once I let go of the things, I found myself. I am 71 years old. I am alone in the desert, and I have never been happier. So take a look at your life. Take a look at the people around your table. Are they there for you, or are they there for what you provide? Measure twice, cut once. And if the measurements don't add up, don't be afraid to tear it all down and start over. Because the view from the other side of the demolition is spectacular. My name is Hank. I am just a contractor. And I finally built a home that no one can take away from me. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt used or unappreciated, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. Let's support each other. I am going to finish my coffee and watch the stars come out. Safe travels, everyone. And remember, you are worth more than what you can pay for.